Kia ora tātou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mareika Penman toko ingoa. Hello and welcome to the Rugby World Cup 2021 Tournament Opening Press Conference. My name is Mareika Penman. I'm Rugby World Cup Communications Manager. We're delighted to have you here today. We're just 5 days away from what is truly a historic moment in time for women's rugby. To begin, I'd like to just take us through a karakia, a traditional Maori blessing. This particular karakia has been written especially for this tournament and is based around Hine Moana, who is the Maori goddess of the ocean. No mai te au, o nui, o kaha, o roa, mai ronga, mai raro, mai waho, mai roto, o oeha, haumie, huie, tai kie. I'll now hand over to Dominic Rumbles, World Rugby Chief Communications Officer.
Thank you, Mareika. Wow, what an opening, fantastic. Certainly sums up what has been an incredible morning and day so far as well with the team welcome ceremony. Welcome to this media briefing for those who are in the room, but also for those who are joining us online to outline our hopes and ambitions for Rugby World Cup 2021 playing in 22. In terms of format, as I say, we've got people online, so we will take questions from the floor first, after our top table have made their opening remarks. Please, when you want to ask a question, raise your hand, wait for the mic, introduce yourself, ask your question for the benefit of those who are obviously joining us online. We'll then move to take questions from the online scenario as well. I'll have to read those out. You won't be able to hear the questions, but I'll read those out the top table. Introducing our top table from my right, starting with Alison Hughes, World Rugby Tournament Director of the tournament. Sally Horrocks, into what, month number 4 now?
Just hit five months.
There we go. Director of Women's Rugby at World Rugby. World Rugby CEO Alan Gilpin. And Tournament Director Michelle Hooper for NZ Rugby. You're all very welcome. I'm going to hand over to Alan to say introductory remarks. But before I do, just to remember, this is a briefing on the tournament and the growth of women's rugby. Any other wider World Rugby matters, we can take them offline afterwards. I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you very much. Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Dom. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa. Welcome, everybody. The waiting is over, finally. Rugby's great family reunion kicks off this weekend, as you know, and the excitement is certainly palpable. For those of you who were there this morning, you saw a truly fantastic team welcome ceremony. We've got some very excited teams ready to get stuck in, as you saw. Over the next 6 weeks, we're anticipating a very special tournament here, a celebration of women's rugby, but also a celebration of women in rugby, which is really important to us. Rugby World Cup 2021, of course, playing in 2022, will be an historic event on many levels. The first edition of this tournament to be held in the Southern Hemisphere, and of course, therefore, the first to be held in New Zealand, the first to feature the Fijiana team, very popular edition we saw this morning. The first to feature the expanded tournament window and tournament format that we have for Rugby World Cups, and of course the first after a global pandemic. It's certainly great to be back, and the fans obviously think so too. New Zealand will set a new attendance record on Saturday for women's rugby, and for a women's match at what will be a pumping Eden Park on Saturday. As of last night, more than 35,000 tickets have been snapped up, and the last remaining few are selling very fast. So that will not only be a record attendance for a Rugby World Cup match, but also for a women's sporting event held in New Zealand. And further, we can confirm that a full house will welcome the Black Ferns when they play Wales at Waitakere on match day 2. If you can see it, you can be it. And this Rugby World Cup and the manner in which it will be played, the record digital and broadcast platform that it will occupy, will provide an unprecedented visibility at a time when women's sport is growing exponentially around the world. New Zealand will see new social media superstars created and will inspire a new generation to play and support the game. And this tournament will really be the fuse for what will be a golden decade of opportunity, of certainty and of growth for women's test rugby, with 3 Rugby World Cups in England, Australia and the USA, and the launch of our WXV tournament to look forward to between now and the end of this tournament, between now and the end of 2033, driving investment and growth in the women's game that's so vital. So the time is now. Our vision is for a sport where every girl and boy has equal opportunity to play rugby, and where the visibility in the women's game matches the visibility in the men's game, where targeted investment will lead to really transformational change and where we have strong and sustainable competition and growth plans. So finally, before I hand over to Sally to talk in a bit more detail about the women's game, a couple of thank yous. Great teams make great events, and would like to acknowledge the huge efforts from our partners in New Zealand Rugby, in the New Zealand Government, the host cities, and for everyone involved who's overcome the challenges of the pandemic to organise what we know will be a really special nationwide celebration over the next 6 weeks. Thank you. Sally.
Thanks, Alan. Kia ora koutou. First of all, I'd like to share my excitement. As Dom said, it's month 5 for me in post, so to get the opportunity to come to a Women's World Cup, first time Southern Hemisphere in New Zealand, is absolutely fantastic. I feel incredibly privileged to be here. And it's going to be an incredible 6 weeks ahead. And there's a tremendous buzz, energy, momentum, as many have noted, around sort of the development of women's sport. So the opportunity for us to kick on beyond what we see over the next 6 weeks is tremendous. And I'm sure it will be well worth the wait after all the hard work from everyone involved. Michelle and Ali by my side, who I know have led the way for us as part of our tournament director team. And we've got record crowds, as Alan said, set for this opening weekend. So it's really clear to me that there is huge growing appeal for women's rugby. And our athletes now are becoming those inspirational role models, and so they should be. And they're getting that recognition and becoming household names. So whilst today marks the start of our Rugby World Cup journey, the next 6 weeks ahead, I think it's really important for us to recognise that it's the start for us at World Rugby of the next stage of the transformation and the growth of the game. And the work continues beyond week 6 and November the 12th. And we have to press on ahead and fast track and accelerate the development of the game. So the Rugby World Cup here in New Zealand and the 3 that follow have a very, very important part to play. They become our anchor, if you like, and our compass, roadmap that we can build our growth plan around, so that we ensure that we develop this great game for girls and women everywhere. The girls and women's game is a real cornerstone for the growth of the whole game for World Rugby. And if we're going to achieve our global vision of a sport for all, a truly global sport for all, we're going to need more girls and women playing, coaching, refereeing, volunteering. We're going to need them volunteering at grassroots level right the way through to becoming leaders in our sport. So how are we going to do this? It's great to talk the talk, but we actually have to deliver over the next 10 years. So we're focusing our attention in 4 main areas, and I'll take you through them. But I think it's really important to mention our players. Players are at the heart of everything we do, and their safety and their welfare and listening to what they need and want is key to us at World Rugby in all that we do going forward. So just bearing that in mind as we work through these 4 areas. So the first is profile. We want to increase the profile, awareness, and therefore the demand for women and girls rugby. And that may require changing perceptions. We want the world to know that rugby is a game for girls and women everywhere. We'd like it to be cool, fun, entertaining, accessible, and that will help drive participation and retain girls and women in the game, but it will also drive a younger audience, and it will help us grow that fan base globally, and that in turn drives revenue. And revenue is important. Without revenue and funds, we can't reinvest in the game and take it to the next level. And our players are those inspirational role models that will be central to our campaigns and promotion around the women's game going forward. The second area is the professional game, and we'll support the accelerated commercial and professional development of the women's game, including the WXV that Alan referenced a moment ago. So that will be our flagship annual competition that will launch next year, that will act as a springboard through to the next World Cups, providing increased competitive opportunity for 18 teams around the world. And we'll look to raise standards on and off the pitch in our competitions, and we'll support our unions domestically, we'll support our cross-border competitions, and we'll build through WXV to the pinnacle events, to the World Cups. But it's really important, again, that we look after our players on their pathway to professionalism. We need to provide those support structures around them. And we'll look at that for both 15s and also for 7s. I think it's important that we remember 7s as an alternative pathway for talented athletes that takes them right the way through to the Olympics. The third area is growing the game, the recreational and community game. Without a thriving recreational and community game, particularly for girls, we will not achieve our objectives. And we want to accelerate that so that they have more places to play, more clubs, more welcoming environments, increased number of coaches, age group pathways and competitions. But we can't do that on our own. That's the job primarily of our union partners. So what we are exploring at the moment is a new way of partnering with our unions together to understand what it is they need and how we can support them better going forward. And again, that is across all formats. If the introduction for girls rugby is touch rugby, tag rugby, new non-contact community formats in the game, then we will explore those. We want this to be a sport for all. And finally, we'll focus hard on providing strong leadership, long-term planning and increased investment. In my experience, and I've worked across other women's sports, we need to look long-term. Short-termism won't take us where we need to be. So if we want to grow safely and sustainably and long-term responsibly, we're going to need increased investment, a long-term plan, and the support of our union partners, our regional partners, and also our commercial partners. Now, those topics will be under discussion when we go to our Women in Rugby Summit on the 10th and 11th of this month, just before the final in Auckland, when we meet with all of our union leaders from around the world. So we're developing a sport and business plan for the next 10 years, and we'll finalise that as we go into 2023. But it will have to be a real team effort if we're going to achieve all that we seek by way of a vision of girls and boys having equal opportunity in rugby. So in closing, it's only right that we acknowledge those that have gone before, those people that have brought us to today. I'm very new in post, and there's been such an awful lot of fantastic work done in the game. And they're tremendous pioneers that we should celebrate, not just in New Zealand, but everywhere. So on the behalf of World Rugby, I'd like to thank them and reassure them that we will work incredibly hard over the next decade to realise the full potential of rugby for girls and women everywhere. Thank you. Tēnā koutou.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks, Alan. We'll go straight to questions from the floor. If you have one, please raise your hand. Thank you. Don't be shy. Yeah, just wait for the mic to come.
Hi there, Nathan Williamson, rugby.com.au. I guess for Alan, this is the first World Cup post sort of COVID. I'm just wondering how's going through that whole process kind of changed how you plan these events and sort of how it could change it heading forward?
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, I mean, yes, I think, you know, it's been a challenge. We're a year later than originally planned, as you know, so, you know, hugely challenging environment. I think COVID came at a really difficult time for particularly the women's form of our game. Making sure in the last 12 months that the teams that you're going to see produce great rugby over the next 6 weeks, that they've had that opportunity to prepare properly, has required a lot more investment and a lot more effort than was originally probably the case. But we're delighted with the way that they've all got stuck into that, and I think there's probably a bit of a blueprint there for the future in terms of, as Sally said, making sure the investment is there to give these teams, these athletes, the best chance.
Thank you. Yeah.
Narelle Sindos from News Hub Discovery. Alan, how much of a gap is there, do you think, between men's and women's rugby right now?
That probably depends who you ask, doesn't it? I think, we're going to see some incredible rugby over the next 6 weeks. And in many respects, there's areas of the women's game that are leading the sport. The ball's in play more. There's less of the parts of the game that new fans find confusing, possibly. So we're going to see a great, vibrant tournament, you know, great competition that's going to allow new fans to fall in love with the sport. There's an investment gap in the women's game to the men's game that, as Sally said, we've got to work hard over a long period of time to make sure we address There's a gap, obviously, in terms of our playing populations that, again, we know there's a massive opportunity to address. So there are gaps, but there are big differences, and there's a huge opportunity. And we know, and I know we say it a lot, that the women's game, rugby for women and girls, is the biggest opportunity for the game to grow, and that's what we've all got to get hold of.
I've got one for Sally Narelle here from News Hub Discovery. You talk about how you want to change it. How difficult do you think it will be to implement your vision?
I think it will be tough. So to be entirely transparent and honest, we probably need to fast track through the next 10 years to reach the position that we're all hoping for, where we have that level of equality for girls and boys. However, leadership starts from the top, and some of the experiences I've had so far in the conversations I've had, admittedly, quite recently, but the commitment is there, the opportunity is clear, and some of the metrics are now coming into place. Now, my experience has come across other women's sport, but particularly football, soccer, over the last 10, 15 years, working for FIFA, UEFA, and in the European markets, in England, Germany and France. And there you can see the fast tracking of consumer demand, fan audience, the metrics around broadcast sponsorship revenues. So you can start to see the business case and the return on investment. However, it takes time. It won't happen overnight. So I'm a fan of a clear plan, some strong investment behind it, and a lot of hard work. But I think we can get there. I don't think it's insurmountable. It's perfectly achievable. But we need to line up our unions, our countries, and our leaders behind us, and we need to do it together. But that's the exciting opportunity.
Thanks, Sally. Further questions from the floor? Yeah.
Alan, you talked about the growth of the game. For the next competition in 2025, you are planning to go on a 16-team competition. Is that your way to grow the game, and don't you think it's too early in terms of levels to go on a 16 competition? Thanks.
It's a great question. There are always two schools of thought, I think, about, do you keep a competition like a World Cup smaller and have maybe, more close games, or do you expand? And we've had this debate in relation to men's and women's World Cups for many years. I think for us, it was important to grow the tournament beyond the current format to provide more opportunities. So you think about the regional qualification, for example, around Women's Rugby World Cup. We want the opportunity for more of those regional competitions to provide a pathway ultimately to that sort of, that ultimate World Cup dream for teams. And I think that inspires more girls to want to play the game. So that was an important step for us. There's no doubt that when you're expanding a competition, you therefore got to invest in the competitiveness. And that's why WXV that Sally mentioned in particular is so important, because having an annual competition that gives 18 teams, and actually more than 18 teams because of the way that teams will qualify in and out of WXV, that opportunity to be playing against the right level of competition for them every year is what's going to build that competitiveness. We're not naive to think that that's all going to happen in the next 3 years before 2025. So again, that's about a long-term plan, long-term responsible, sustainable investment. And hopefully as we get beyond 25 to 29 and ultimately to 33, we'll see the sort of fruits of that labour and that investment. And that's why, particularly in the women's game, that long-term vision and awarding World Cups all the way through to 2033 is so important to provide certainty, because that's what's going to drive people to invest with us around the game.
Thanks, Alan. Just on that, maybe I'm going to ask Ali, can you just outline the qualification process through out of this tournament into the next tournament, 25?
Sure, yeah. Kia ora, everyone. The qualification, we already have one team that has qualified in the form of our hosts, England, and any semi-finalists from Rugby World Cup 2021 will qualify for 2025. So by the end of this tournament, we will either have 4 or 5 teams qualified for Rugby World Cup 25, and then we go into some regional qualification through 23 and 24. And then finally, we'll look at WXV in 2024 for the remainder of our qualified teams. So as Alan said, a lot of opportunity through regional competition to qualify for the next World Cup and those 16 teams.
Thank you, Ali. Further questions from the floor? Yeah, Nathan.
Sorry, just one point on that. I believe for last year, the last tournament I think was top 7 qualified for this one.
Correct.
And you're going to an expanded one, but it's only top 4 qualifying. Can you just kind of explain the logic that you sort of came up with to get to that decision?
Sure, we wanted to make sure that, again, through those regional competitions, more and more teams had an opportunity to qualify, potentially even closer to the event. So by minimising the amount of teams that qualify from this tournament to the next one, we have the opportunity to expand further through the regional comps, through WXV, and ultimately give teams a bigger and wider opportunity to get into that 16-team format.
Thanks very much. Any further questions from the floor before we go to those who come in through the virtual platform? No, right, okay, I'm going to try, my eyesight's not brilliant, I'm going to try and read these out for the top table. Dorian's been firing them through to me. First question is for Michelle, and it's from Zoe George. Ticket sales overall, where are we at, both for the opening round but also throughout the tournament, and how confident are you of filling out those matches?
Kia ora tātou everyone, lovely to see you all here today. Great question. So we're on track for, we've had 35,000 tickets snapped up for the opening match day of Rugby World Cup this Saturday, 8th of October, but there's still a few golden tickets left for those that are eager to buy up and make sure they don't miss out on this once in a lifetime opportunity. We're tracking towards a sellout for that match, which will be a moment in history for us here in New Zealand to sell out Eden Park for women's sport. And in terms of overall ticket sales for Rugby World Cup, we're at about 75,000 overall sold for the whole tournament. Our attendance target's around 127,000 for the whole tournament. So when you look at the fact the tournament hasn't started yet, you know, we're pretty proud of that number to date, and we've got a good 5 weeks of incredible rugby about to start to sell out the remaining spots in those matches. So you know, it's an incredible tournament. It's going to be full of entertainment on and off the field. The best of women's rugby on the field and the best of entertainment off the field. And at a price point never seen really before, $5 for a child's ticket, from $10 for an adult, up to $40 for an adult, depending on which match you're going to. We just don't want anybody to miss out who has the chance to come. So really it's all on for old and young. Make sure you get out and buy your tickets for Rugby World Cup.
Fantastic, thanks Michelle. Question from Steve Noble, Rugby Asia 247, probably for Sally or Alan. On the growth of the game targeting girls and inclusivity, what's the plan to make more use of programs like Child Fund Rugby Partnership and get into rugby to grow the game? Maybe Sally, you want to start?
Can I start on Child Fund? I'll start on the sport for development piece. So Child Fund are our charity partner for this World Cup. So thank you, first of all, because they're doing some brilliant work. Child Fund Get Into Rugby is a fantastic programme. So where we partner with unions, particularly those in emerging markets where rugby is underdeveloped or at the very early stages of its development, we work with Child Fund, and they're doing some tremendous work introducing girls into rugby. And some of that work is not just around playing the game, it's around keeping girls safe, it's around safeguarding, it's around education and health and nutrition advice. It's way broader. The educational programme that they run for us and with us in partnership in those unions is absolutely incredible. And it is particularly vibrant in Asia, which I think is where the question is coming from. So we're working with them in partnership to identify further unions where we can collaborate to give girls more exposure to that type of support.
Yeah, look, just to add to that, as Sai said, a great partnership with Child Fund Rugby. They're doing some brilliant work in some really interesting communities, places like Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia in Asia, using rugby as a vehicle to teach leadership and life skills to particularly young girls in communities where gender equality is really challenging. So that's a really powerful vehicle for us as a sport. And I think that's a great example of rugby being more about what we just normally see on the field of play and the opportunities it creates, again, particularly for young girls. We've just relaunched or about to relaunch Get Into Rugby, sort of new evolution of, and again, it's a program about getting a ball into kids' hands, you know, boys and girls around the world, and it's really effective. I was in Georgia last week, which is a real hotbed for men's rugby, you know, known as a real sort of a strong men's rugby community, but actually, you know, seeing Get Into Rugby really being used in the women and girls games. So yeah, we're really excited about, I think, what Get Into Rugby in its new form will do for growth of the game.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Sally. From Vanina Ratataugawa, Fijiana, obviously making their 15s Rugby World Cup debut. What will they bring to the tournament, and what are your hopes for them? Alan, I'll probably start with you. And
a lot of dancing, I think, if this morning was anything to go by. I mean, talk about a team welcome. Blimey, it was incredible. It's great to have them in their first Women's World Cup. We've seen, what they can do on the sevens field, both the women's team and of course the men's. And already, their performances as a women's 15 side, starting to really develop. So I think they'll bring a lot of competition on the field, a lot of support, and a lot of noise and a real buzz off the field, and they're a fantastic addition to the tournament.
Thanks, Alan.
Just one further point on that. Some of the stories of those Fijiana women are tremendous. I think the captain alluded to it today, some of the struggles that they've come through, the funding they've had to raise, their domestic situations and their employment. Just, that authenticity and that voice of a player, of a young woman, so very human stories, for me, is what they also bring. And it's one of the particular attributes, I think, of women's sport, and particularly in this case of the Fijians, the Fijianas, which blows my mind. They're incredible women, absolutely incredible.
Thanks, Sally. Here. Question for Michelle from Brittany Mitchell. First Rugby World Cup in the Southern Hemisphere. What has New Zealand Rugby done to make this so special and make it the biggest tournament yet?
I think New Zealand Rugby set out to supercharge the women's game by bringing it here to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a part of that was honouring the legacy of the black jersey globally in terms of the Black Ferns and their obviously win record in rugby, 5 times Rugby World Cup champions. But a really important part was that hosting a Rugby World Cup here in Aotearoa, New Zealand is seen as the holy grail for rugby players, and we really honour the fact that these international teams have come to take part in this Rugby World Cup, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them to play rugby in a place that they know loves the game as much as they do. I think what we've seen with the crowd numbers and the attendance targets is that New Zealanders are really getting out to back, and a number of travelling internationals as well, these 12 international teams, and they want to show the manaakitanga that New Zealand's famous for, and our passion for the great game. So we like to infuse aroha or love into rugby, and we like everybody that comes here to feel that when they come here to play. So that's what I really think is special about that. But also I think we're here to showcase Oceania, and this is a Rugby World Cup for all of Oceania. And I think when you talked about Fijiana and this being their first Rugby World Cup, part of the Pacific nations, and they really are the sweethearts of rugby, and grace, style, elegance, speed, and that joie de vivre and love of entertaining people. And there's a huge Fijian population in New Zealand, so we're expecting to see a great turnout from the Pacific nations supporting Fijiana in this. And I know a number of their families have travelled from Fiji for this opening weekend, so I'm sure there's going to be lots of choo-chooing and crowd cheering on Saturday at Eden Park.
Absolutely, and you probably touched on this in the answer, but follow-up question from Brittany. What would you consider a successful tournament, or New Zealand Rugby consider a successful tournament, and what would success look like in terms of the development of the women's game here in New Zealand?
I think mostly for us is changing that value statement around women's sport. So, showing this is turning the spotlight on women's rugby and celebrating how great our female athletes are globally. So for us, success is full stadiums as much as possible so that everyone gets the chance to see how incredible these women are. And once they see how great the games are and this style of rugby that's being played, the rugby sells itself. It's just getting people to see and have a experience with women's rugby. So, and I think in terms of the legacy that it leaves, I've got a 6-year-old daughter. She loves playing rugby. She's played for 2 seasons. All of her friends play rugby. Our club is about 46% player registration is female. So it's changing at a grassroots level here in New Zealand already. And this will inspire generations of children, not just here in New Zealand, but globally. And I think at a time when women globally really need that belief and hope in something, and sport really gives people that. So I think rugby plays such a powerful role in inspiring future generations.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. Time for one more question. It's from Vanina again, and it's to Alan. It's probably quite topical, given you're going to be out there in a week or so. What is World Rugby doing in terms of prioritising development within the Pacific Islands, and what can we do to make sure that more Pacific Island nations have the opportunity to qualify for a future World Cup?
A great question. I mean, there's lots of pieces to that. I mean, one part of that is about expanding World Cups, about giving more opportunities to more teams to find their way to World Cups, and that's not just obviously for the Pacific Islands, but for all of our regions around the world. So there's a part of it that is about competition pathways and making sure there are opportunities, not just World Cups, but every year for these teams to play at all levels in the right type of competition. Ultimately, a lot of it's about investment. You know, we've invested more in Pacific Island rugby, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years than ever before. You're seeing that in the Fijian Drua, in Moana Pacifica, in what they're doing in Super Rugby. You'll see it in what the Fijiana will achieve, I'm sure, over the next 6 weeks. You'll see it in what the Fijian men's team will achieve in France next year. So, again, and that's not just about Fiji, it's about the wider Pacific picture. But we're investing more, putting more expertise into those areas, and working really hard with all the Pacific Islands to help continue to develop rugby, and understanding that their place in rugby is not just important to them, it's important to the global game.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that as well, we held our first Oceania combine as well a couple of weeks ago, and obviously the purpose of that was to place players into Super W teams, and that's been the first time that's happened as well, which is an incredible development. So very much an area of growth. One final question? No? Wonderful. Look, thank you very much to our top table today. Thank you to you guys, and it's been a busy day as well. Here's to an outstanding opening day at Eden Park on Saturday and a world record crowd. So thank you very much. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Well done.